What's happening with iPhone sales in China? Are they soaring or sinking? A new year often brings new beginnings, but for Apple's iPhone sales in China, the start of 2024 has been less than auspicious. According to Jefferies analysts, the first week of the year saw a significant 30% drop in sales. This is no minor dip, it's a plunge that's making waves in the tech world. And what's behind this decline? The answer lies in the increasingly competitive landscape of China's smartphone market. Apple is facing stiff competition from domestic players, particularly Huawei, which seems to be gaining the upper hand. Interestingly, this drop in sales didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the primary catalyst for an overall double-digit drop in China's smartphone shipments during the first week of the year. While other Android brands and Huawei experienced relatively flat growth year over year during this period, Apple's sales took a nosedive. You might be thinking, but hasn't Apple been offering discounts on its iPhone models? You're absolutely right. Despite aggressive discounting of multiple iPhone models through major Chinese online marketplaces, Apple's sales in China have taken a hit. Even a 16% price reduction on the iPhone 15 Pro and iPhone 15 Pro Max on the e-commerce platform Pinduoduo couldn't salvage the situation. Putting this into perspective, the 30% drop is a sharp acceleration from the 3% year-over-year decline that Apple saw for all of 2023 in its third largest market. To break it down further, the 3% decline in 2023 equated to a mere 0.4% decrease in Apple's market share. The Jefferies analysts attribute Apple's decline largely to competitive pressures from Chinese rivals, especially Huawei, which made a strong comeback with the launch of its Mate 60 series of phones in August of the previous year. This drop in sales indicates a challenging start to the year for Apple in China. But as we know, in the world of tech, fortunes can change rapidly. Will Apple bounce back, or will its rivals continue to nibble away at its market share? Only time will tell. So, what impact does this drop in iPhone sales have on the overall smartphone market in China? Well, let's dive in. The first week of 2024 saw a ripple effect in the Chinese smartphone market. With Apple's sales taking a nosedive, the entire smartphone shipment in China experienced a double-digit drop. This decline is not just a blip on the radar, it's a significant shift, a seismic tremor, shaking the foundations of a market that's been dominated by a few key players for years. While Apple was grappling with a 30% drop, other Android brands and Huawei managed to hold their ground. These brands experienced relatively flat growth year over year during the same period. This performance, in stark contrast to Apple's, highlights the resilience of these brands amidst the market's turmoil. Huawei in particular deserves a closer look. Once hamstrung by US sanctions, Huawei has made a triumphant return to the high-end smartphone market with its Mate 60 series. These devices have been a game-changer, fueling Huawei's resurgence and enabling it to weather the storm that's been shaking the market. In the final quarter of 2023, Huawei's share in the Chinese smartphone market rose by about 6%, a remarkable feat considering the competitive landscape and the pressures that come with it. Apple's struggles in the Chinese market are a clear indicator of the increasing competitive pressures from domestic rivals, especially Huawei. With the launch of its Mate 60 series, Huawei has signaled its comeback, and it's not going unnoticed. Despite aggressive discounting of multiple iPhone models through major Chinese online marketplaces, Apple's sales still took a hit. The iPhone 15 Pro and iPhone 15 Pro Max, for example, received a 16% price reduction on the e-commerce platform Pinduoduo, but this didn't stop the sales slide. In the grand scheme of things, this shift in the Chinese smartphone market is more than just a fluctuation. It's a clear sign of changing tides and growing competitive pressures, especially from domestic players who are stepping up their game. It's clear that the Chinese smartphone market is experiencing a significant shakeup. And with these shifts, the future of this market is looking more interesting than ever. What strategies has Apple been employing to boost its sales, and how are its rivals responding? As we delve into this question, it's worth noting that Apple has been playing a high-stakes game of strategy in the Chinese market. One of the key tactics that Apple has turned to is aggressive discounting of its flagship iPhone models on major Chinese online marketplaces. For instance, in the first week of 2024, the iPhone 15 Pro and iPhone 15 Pro Max were discounted by a whopping 16% on the e-commerce platform Pinduoduo. This strategy, however, wasn't sufficient to stem the tide of declining sales. Despite these aggressive discounts, Apple's iPhone sales in China suffered a steep 30% drop in the first week of 2024, indicating that price cuts alone aren't enough to win over consumers in this highly competitive market. Now let's turn our attention to the competitive landscape. It's impossible to discuss this without mentioning Huawei, one of Apple's fiercest rivals in the Chinese market. Huawei has been applying its own pressure on Apple, particularly with the launch of its Mate 60 series of phones in August of the previous year. This new line of phones is widely seen as Huawei's triumphant return to the high-end smartphone market, following years of US sanctions that had previously hampered its progress. This comeback has proven to be a game-changer. During the final quarter of 2023, Huawei's share in the Chinese smartphone market rose by about 6%. This increase, coupled with Apple's declining sales, has led to a shift in market dynamics. Looking ahead, analysts predict that Apple will continue to face intense competitive pressure from domestic rivals throughout 2024. While Apple's shipment volumes are expected to continue declining by double digits, Huawei is expected to continue gaining market share. In this high-stakes game, Apple's aggressive pricing strategy has not been enough to counterbalance the competition. Despite the tech giant's efforts, its rivals are not backing down. The Chinese smartphone market is a battlefield and every move counts. Despite Apple's efforts, its rivals are not backing down. With Apple's decline, who's rising to fill the void? The answer lies with a familiar rival, Huawei. This Chinese giant has been making significant strides, particularly with the launch of its Mate 60 line. This series, released in August of 2023, is seen as a symbol of Huawei's resurgence in the high-end smartphone arena, following years of setbacks due to US sanctions. Huawei's rise has not been subtle. In the final quarter of 2023, the company saw its share in the Chinese smartphone market increase by an impressive 6%. This growth, in a market where Apple's presence is dwindling, is a testament to Huawei's resilience and adaptability. The Mate 60 line, widely celebrated for its innovative features and competitive pricing, has been a significant contributor to this success. Now let's turn our attention to the future. According to Jefferies analysts, Huawei's ascent is only expected to continue. They estimate that Huawei will ship around 64 million smartphones worldwide in 2024, a significant leap from less than 35 million in 2023. This projection is a clear indication of the company's growing global influence and its ability to challenge established brands like Apple. On the other hand, Apple is expected to face even more competitive pressure from domestic rivals throughout 2024. The analysts predict a continued decline in Apple's shipment volumes, which will likely lead to further erosion of its market share. The 30% drop in iPhone sales in the first week of 2024 is a clear indication of the challenges that lie ahead for the US tech giant. In conclusion, the dynamics of the Chinese smartphone market are changing rapidly. Domestic brands led by Huawei are emerging as formidable competitors, challenging the dominance of foreign players like Apple. As these trends continue to unfold, one thing is clear: the future of the Chinese smartphone market seems to be leaning towards domestic brands. So what lies ahead for the Chinese smartphone market? We turn to the forecast by research firm IDC, which paints an optimistic picture. After 10 consecutive quarters of falling shipments, the Chinese smartphone market is expected to rebound. This anticipated comeback is not specified in numerical terms, but it's clear that year-on-year sales growth is expected to occur in the fourth quarter. This forecasted resurgence is a testament to the dynamic nature of the Chinese smartphone market. It's a market that continues to evolve, with domestic brands like Huawei at the forefront of this change. The increased competition and the constant drive for innovation are contributing to this expected rebound. The shift in market trends, combined with the relentless competitive pressure, makes the Chinese smartphone market a fascinating landscape. As the market rebounds and domestic players continue to gain ground, the dynamics of this market are set to shift even further. The Chinese smartphone market is certainly one to watch in the coming months. That's a wrap on the current state of iPhone sales in China. We've seen a significant drop of 30% in the first week of 2024, causing a ripple effect on the overall smartphone market. Amidst this, domestic brands like Huawei are making a comeback, posing a formidable challenge to Apple. The landscape of the Chinese smartphone market is shifting, and we'll be here to keep you informed. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like this video for more insights. Stay tuned for more updates.